ourselves in incredibly unique and unstable times. Um, I think when we entered this pandemic time in April, March and April and May, we thought maybe we'd evolve out of it. And we find ourselves still in the thick of it all. In fact, in many ways, we might be even thicker into it because there's this sort of tantalizing seduction to open back up again and to do things like we kind of normally would, and yet then not, right? We're still in incredible amounts of uncertainty, instability. Things are changing all the time. So I just sort of want to acknowledge the time that we're in and just remind ourselves, especially as leaders running organizations who have had to pivot and shift, that we need to give ourselves a lot of grace, right? We still need to give ourselves and the people that we lead, our stakeholders, our clients, our colleagues, a lot of grace to be able to move through this and give latitude to figure out what to do. There's a saying that we use in the Dare to Lead world, which is when we do this work, we do this work, meaning we can't just read about it. We can't facilitate, kind of the leadership work without actually attempting to do it. So when we talk about things like leading with values, being willing to be vulnerable, taking risk, we have to attempt to embody that as well. So we're going to actually do some values work here in a little bit and get a chance to get clear on our values and think about how aligned we are in terms of our life and the values that we say that we have. A couple technical considerations. So we're doing this, virtually. There's been an interesting, I think, opportunity that this virtual world has presented us in that we realize now we can work from many places. We can connect across many places and time zones. And we have a lot more open in terms of engaging, right? There's new ways to engage using this virtual platform. However, internet can go down, there's lag, so there's a whole myriad of issues, right? So there's opportunity, and always with opportunity comes issues. So I'm hoping the technical aspects of this is going to go really smoothly, and ask questions, please engage. I do understand there's sort of a bit of a delay, so if you do have questions, it will pop up to me. But it just may take a moment, so we'll be patient with each other and ask questions, give comments. I think engaging work is the most interesting, and entertaining, and also impactful, right? So I think the more that we can engage and feel it real within us, the better we are to kind of actually have these kinds of presentations and offerings sink in. Okay, we'll go on. Okay, so some of the things that I just want you to be thinking about, that we're going to be thinking about in this presentation, is how do we inspire people when we're struggling ourselves, right? How do you guide people when we don't even know the way, right? So how am I supposed to show the way to my team when I myself don't even know the way? And how do you instill confidence, right? When you yourself may be feeling kind of a lack of confidence and uncertainty. Leadership, again, how can you be the face of calm when you're terrified inside? But these are the asks of leaders, right? Leaders should be able to inspire people even when you're struggling, and guide people. And there are ways to do this, right? And we're going to talk about that today. We are still in the midst of this COVID time. It doesn't seem like we're exiting it anytime soon. And the social tension in the United States seems to just continue to grow. So we are facing a myriad of uncertainties, fears, and it's really on us as leaders to hold steady and find our ground and guide our people through this. And there's ways to do that, right? And one of the main ways today that we're going to talk about is by anchoring to our values. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So daring leadership is a model that makes leadership accessible to anybody. And I think the Dare to Lead model, there's several reasons why I like this model. And if you've heard this before, if you're familiar with it, I think it's always important to kind of just hear it again and really think about the kind of leadership you want to practice yourself personally, and the kind of leadership you want to bring to your team, to your clients, your stakeholders, the people that you serve, right? What we are needing now in leadership is more authenticity, more genuine connection. We need something that is going to allow those elements without sacrificing strategy and efficiency or forward movement. We absolutely need a model that honors diversity and helps hold us accountable for being more inclusive and bringing belonging to the work that we do and the people that we serve. We are faced now with sort of the idea of leadership being decisive and autocratic, which is much more masculine, or the need for it to be nurturing and compassionate, which is associated with the feminine. And this particular model allows for both. So embracing the Dare to Lead model and values in this way really does allow all these things to be brought into our leadership practice. And it doesn't matter what industry you are in, this leadership work is useful across all industries, all sectors, whatever size organization. It's going to be very, very useful. So I hope you find some takeaways for it. And one of the interesting things I will say that we have found is that, even this particular model of leadership, because the researcher and the author and the creator of this is a woman, Brené Brown is a woman, has gotten criticism for not being hard-hitting enough and not being appropriate to business strategy. And yet, as you'll see in a moment, it is incredibly research-based. And I think we can tell in the world that we're in is we need a different kind of leadership. We are in need of a new way to lead and to connect with people and to do our work. And this definitely does provide that. So we'll go to the next. Okay, so really quickly about the research, because I think it's important to recognize how grounded this is in actual research with actual organizations and leaders across the board in many different industries, from special forces at West Point and the Army and Navy Academy to Silicon Valley to Pixar and Disney. This work has been researched across the board in the classroom with teachers, nonprofits, Fortune 500s, all over. And though there's been commonalities, it doesn't matter where you are working. It doesn't matter where you're living. The idea of wholehearted living and making your way to the arena to live authentically and vulnerably is true for all of us. And it is absolutely true for your direct reports if you are in a position of authority. And it is amazingly true for the people that we're trying to serve. So whether it's clients, stakeholders, that sort of thing. The other thing that we know for sure is that vulnerability and shame is equal opportunity employer, right? It does not discriminate. So in order to get to authenticity, which we know is a critical component for effective leadership, we're going to have to move through vulnerability and shame. And often, even something as simple as living out our values is a vulnerable act, which we will talk about in a little bit. So this research and the ideas of vulnerability, shame, authenticity, being brave exists across the board. And I love the quote that she uses, the Theodore Roosevelt quote about the brave man that goes into the arena, and it's not the critic, right? It's not the critic who's on the outside, saying things about, judging what you're doing, judging your decisions. It's those people are not the ones that matter. It is those folks, and you want to surround yourself with people who are in the arena with you, making brave and bold decisions, taking risks, getting knocked down, and finding a way to get back up. Because in this context where we are right now, that is really all we can ask of ourselves, is to make the boldest, bravest decision with the maximum info that we have, which right now often it's not a lot, and to continue to move forward. And you're going to get criticized, right? We're going to be judged, and we just need to hold steady to knowing that we're doing the right thing. And values, we will see, is going to be a great anchor to help keep us mindful that, yes, we are acting on and moving forward with what's important based on what we decided for our values, what's most important in our lives. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. So a couple things, right? This really applies to leadership across, which is when you are in the arena, being brave with your life and being brave with your work, you're going to get your ass kicked. You are going to fail. And right now, again, there's no way around this. And failure may not be losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, although that could be. Failure may just be making a decision and then having to reverse that decision a week later because we have different information. So failure is going to look whole lot of ways right now, and we need to find the capacity to embrace the failure and learn from it. And again, latitude and grace for our choices, knowing that when we go in to lead this way, we're going to get knocked down. It's just what's going to happen. But we know how to rise. We can anchor to values. We can anchor to those within the arena, who are our colleagues and people who also live this way to help us through. Really, really important. Again, if you've heard me before, you've heard this 1,000 times, but we always need a reminder. Vulnerability is not weakness. In fact, it's the most accurate measure of courage. It's a willingness to show up, to be seen, to take risks, to say, this is what's important to me and my company and my people, and we are going to make decisions based on that, even if it's not popular, because we're going to hold true to what our integrity is and what our alignment is. That's vulnerable, right? That's vulnerable work, and it is brave work. So the whole kind of rethinking vulnerability, examining the myths of vulnerability is really, really important to be able to do this work and to have the tough conversations that we're going to talk about when accountability comes in is vulnerable, right? These are hard conversations, but we need to be able to have them, to have the kind of organizations that we want to have and to lead during this time of uncertainty. The other part that's really helpful, I think, is this idea that if you are not also in the arena, if you are not also being brave with your life, I don't really care what you have to say, right? And this is an important part because criticism is everywhere. Judgment is everywhere. We are in an age and an era of social media where we want to show kind of how perfect our lives are, how perfect our companies are. It's sort of just wanting to be able to present this sort of perception, and that, because we don't want to get criticized. And the important thing to know is that the real leaders, people doing real leadership right now, are taking risks, making hard choices, and they're getting criticized. So if you're not also doing the same thing, criticize me all you want. I'm not going to listen to it, right? If you want to give me real feedback based on how we defined our values, based on something that I need to be held accountable for, I am totally willing to listen. If you're just going to be judgmental or be nasty, like, keep on walking, right? Not interested in it. And that's a hard thing, but it's going to be really important as you start to bring these kind of values into your workplace and then hold accountability with it, because there will be criticism even within your team. So you've just got to know, if you're on board with me, I'm not interested. I mean, if you're on board with me, I am interested. And if you're not, then, go talk somewhere else. Okay, next slide. So the thing that we are faced is, how do we show up wholeheartedly, being brave in the arena at work, right? What does brave leaders look like in this time right now, in this time of uncertainty? And one of the big things is courageous cultures. We need cultures, even within uncertainty, that are going to embrace diversity and belonging, be willing to make decisions, even with little information, and then perhaps have to circle back and make a different decision. We need courage, right? Because there is not a roadmap right now. And part of this is dealing with a lot of what we call adaptive challenges and problems that don't have a clear solution. And we really need leadership for this. So we make a distinction between leadership and management, where management is really important and it's a whole different set of skill sets, right? Management is protection, direction, order, control, very important. But leadership is something different. Leadership is addressing those problems where there isn't a clear solution, where the answer or the solution through requires us to adjust, shift, adapt, relearn. And these things are really hard because we are anchored very, very, very deeply to our familiar way of doing things. So courageous cultures are ones that are willing to step into that unknown area and address those problems that don't have a clear answer. And that's a really hard thing to do. We'll go on to the next slide. But here's the thing, right? If we look at this list right here, all of us would probably want to have tough conversations. We want to be trustworthy. We want to be innovative. We want to have problem solving. We don't want to do all the opposites, which is here. So these things are the barriers to courage, right? And so when we anchor to values and we have something that we can root to, which is, this is what's important, These are my values. We can all of a sudden have tough conversations around them. We can build trust knowing that everybody is on the same page with what's important and the things that we want to do to move through. We're not going to get stuck in setbacks because we're going to have a clear way to move forward. The clear way is our values. So let's go ahead and move on. So the practice, right? Today we're going to focus on the pillar number 2, but these are the 4 pillars, the 4 skill sets of courage and daring leadership, which is rumbling with vulnerability. And we're not going to spend much time on that other than to say living into values and taking risks is vulnerable work. We're going to spend most of our time talking about living into our values and how that will help brave trust, and then eventually we can rise because we can anchor to what's important. So this is the practice in the Dare to Lead model. Next slide. So a couple things, right? Here's just some kind of bottom lines that you want to keep in mind. There's no way to go through courage without rumbling with vulnerability. You've got to embrace the suck, right? And this is kind of a funny little story where Brene was doing some work with special forces. And after about like 10 days worth of very intense work, one of the soldiers, the teams asked her to run a 5K. And she's like, no, I don't run a 5K. And then she felt, hey, I've been asking these people to be vulnerable, the whole time in this work. Now I should be able to run a 5K. So she starts to train for it. Is like, I don't run a 5K. And so she told him, I can't do it. I just can't do it. Thank you for the invite, not doing it. Well, one of the young soldiers says, ma'am, you just got to embrace the suck. Embrace the suck because it'll feel good afterwards. And that's kind of a mantra about the idea of having these hard conversations. And when we get to accountability and we use some examples, you might think, we don't talk this way, right? We don't do this. This is an awkward way of having a conversation. This is not the way we do it. It's true. And the learning part is hard, but we need to embrace that hard, right? We really need to embrace the ability to move into sort of this courageous place, which is not going to be easy because we don't often live that way. Self-awareness and self-love matter. Your own values, the values that you hold personally to yourself, which might be slightly different than your organizational values, really matter and should also be a roadmap. Who you are is how you lead. Period. Full stop, right? Full stop. So you yourself learning to embrace this work. Again, when we do this work, we do this work. So the more you're willing to embrace and build who you are, then the better you are at being able to become an effective leader. And I'm glad this is hitting home. Thank you so much. The last one, okay, courage is contagious. We're going to talk a lot about what's also contagious, which is anxiety, chaos, stress, right? Courage is contagious. So the more we can embody and model a courageous culture, the more we will be able to kind of translate that culture throughout our team, throughout our organization. Culture change is slow. For sure, in any organization, any institution, it is very slow going to really change a culture. However, we can start to do that, right? We're seeing sort of hints of change right now in our world, in the United States specifically, right? Just kind of tipping points and pressure, pressure cookers that are starting to explode. And it's been slow going, but it's happening. Right? And so the more we can be courageous ourselves, again, who you are is how you lead, the more your organization, your team, the people in your circle will also be courageous. Okay, next one. I want to talk about what is a leader, because I think this is really, really important, right? What even is a leader and what is leadership? So there's a couple different definitions, right? So one is just a person who's going to hold themselves responsible for finding the potential in people and processes and say, I'm going to develop that potential, right? This is my team. This is my organization. I know what we're capable of. It's greatness. I'm willing to hold ourselves accountable for that. I'm going to develop that potential for us. So accountability is a big thing with leadership, right? And we're going to, again, value-based leadership is a great way to really have a path to accountability. It's saying, I see what's possible, right? And I'm going to really, really hold myself accountable for that. And then again, this piece of the adaptive challenge, which we're going to tie to uncertainty, which is going to hopefully be really clear, addressing the problems that don't have a quick, easy answer. There isn't a clear solution. For example, If we were in a building like we typically would be, right, if we were doing this in our quote normal way, right, and there was a fire in the building, that's not leadership, right? We don't need leadership. We need management. There's a fire in the building. We need order, direction, protection. We need to know the way out of the building, grab your stuff, let's do it, right? That's a technical problem, not like a small problem, right? Technical problems can still be really big, but that is a problem with a clear known answer. Adaptive challenges don't have an answer. And I want to be really kind of want to hit this point home, because much of what we're facing now are adaptive challenges. If we go ahead and go on to our slide, actually we'll come back to that, because we're going to talk about why we often put technical solutions on an adaptive challenge. Okay? But what happens when we're in kind of surrounded by adaptive challenges, we're anxious because there's no known solution, and we don't like unknown. As leaders especially, we don't like not knowing what to do, because people expect us, you're a leader, what the heck don't you know what to do? You're a leader, make a decision. You're a leader. Why are you giving us the wrong information? There's this tension, right? Leaders, like, on one hand, be reflective, be curious. And yes, I'm saying that kind of in a light tone. I think you need to be that as a leader. But the pull, the seduction, the requirement from your people is be decisive, make a decision, don't be uncertain. So it's tough. It's really, really tough. So we sit in anxiety. And the good thing, there is a purpose to anxiety. It protects us from harm, right? This idea that when we feel stress, we think there's a threat. So we often get on high alert. The question is, how trained are you in your role to exist in that kind of high alert state, right? Do you do well when kind of there's pressures coming from all angles, when there's uncertainty sort of all around you? That's where we find ourselves, and that's the capacities that we need to grow, right? So there's a good thing for anxiety. However, let's go ahead and continue on. The problem is that sometimes anxiety pushes us to a level where we can no longer be productive. Okay, so this is a diagram of the productive zone of disequilibrium. And you'll see that kind of the up and down, that sort of y-axis is the amount of disequilibrium, the amount of uncertainty, right, that is there within the situation or the issue. And if it's too low, if we're down where it says technical challenge and there's not a lot of disequilibrium, there's not a lot of urgency, right? We're just we're good, we're coasting, it feels familiar. So as leaders, right, we need to, we call raise the heat, okay? We need to raise the heat enough to put people in that productive zone of disequilibrium. Make people realize there's enough urgency to come on, let's get some drive to get the work done, but not so much anxiety that we either fight, flight, or flee, right? So you can see that kind of little zone right there. Now, right now, leaders don't need to raise the heat. The heat is risen. In fact, it's the opposite. For most of us, we are well beyond that level of the productive zone, and we are up in the fight, flight, flee, because things are so uncertain and a little chaotic right now. So as a leader, you may need to bring the heat down. Again, one way to do that, as we'll see, is we can anchor to our values. If we go to the next slide, it shows another kind of way to look at this with the adaptive challenge. I really like this quote by Ronald Heifetz, who's one of the scholars that we use for his leadership theory, adaptive leadership. So he says, the most common cause of failure in leadership is produced by treating adaptive challenges as if they were technical problems. So what happens is we go up into that space where there's high conflict and high ambiguity, and we're in chaos. Right? That's kind of way above that zone of disequilibrium. We are in chaos. Nobody knows what to do. We are out of the productive zone. Or we're with low ambiguity and low conflict, and we're in the technical space, right? So again, the fire in the building may not be totally low conflict. I mean, right? We might feel like, oh my gosh, we got to get out of here, but it's kind of low ambiguity. Get out of the building, right? So that's a technical space. What happens is we're up in that more adaptive space, and we're trying to put technical solutions there. So you see that yellow area, again, is kind of another way to look at that productive zone of disequilibrium, to say somewhere kind of right there within a sweet spot of enough conflict, A little bit of ambiguity, right, is that place where we can do really important work. And this is the adaptive space where we're going to grow and change and shift. Now, when ambiguity gets really high, often people want something to anchor to. So I'm going to say again, and we'll get to the values, we can anchor to our values because our values are ours, right? The values are internal to the company, internal to our organization, to our team. So even if the world is chaotic outside, we can still anchor to our values. And if we need to, we can adjust our values. And that's also an opportunity, but at least we can go there, right? And feel a little bit more secure to be in that productive zone. Okay, let's continue. So one of the things that we need to do with this, as you've seen, is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Right now, we just have to sit in that, right? My kiddos are doing virtual school, like any of you with kids probably are doing a virtual school right now, but they have a re-entry plan. So next week, I'm taking my youngest, who is 10, to go get his COVID test because he's going back to school the next week. It's a little uncomfortable, right? I mean, I need him to go back. I need my kids to go back to school because all of us being at home is talk about chaos and uncertainty and anxiety. We're doing a good job, I think, but it certainly is kind of wrought with challenge, and we're having to figure it out kind of on an hour by hour basis. But so I want them going back to school. They want to go back to school. But it's uncomfortable because what's going to happen when all of a sudden we're exposed, across the board? And we've been pretty, sequestered. We've kept ourselves, kind of isolated. So right now we're really full of many ways to be uncomfortable. Let me see this comment right here. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to get there. Thank you, Megan, for this. I'm going to tell you the number one thing that we have to do for that, because it is so hard right now, given the level of challenges, right? Absolutely. Right. So the leadership skill exists in uncertainty. You be comfortable with being uncomfortable and get your team there too. Let them know this is going to be hard. We're going to embrace the suck. We got this, right? We can move through this together. So the number one thing, let's go ahead and move forward. Oh, well, we're going to one more before we get there. So this is another great slide, right? This talks about how where you are as a leader, getting comfortable with discomfort. This is important. Things are very contagious. The actions of leadership, the model that the leaders do, the executive directors, the CEOs, that is contagious. Your actions, your energy, they will directly impact and influence all the people around you. So again, right, like I gave the example of my kids. I'm a little nervous, but my 10-year-old is too. So I try to downplay it. It's going to be fine. The school's doing everything they can. We're making really smart decisions. The adults are having a lot of conversations. This is the right choice for us right now. And then it calms his nerves a little bit, right? So again, think about what you are translating out and what you are kind of imparting of your own onto your people, your family, your teams. Things are really contagious. So do you want to translate calm, confidence, or do you want to translate doubt and panic? Obviously, I think we would say we want to translate calm and confidence, right? And that's hard. It's hard, especially if you're not feeling calm and confident. And it's a fine line because you're not going to fake it, right? You want to be able to say, I'm scared right now, right? But you want to do it in a way that still has what we call grounded confidence. So let's go on. So how can we lead in uncertain times? That's what we're facing right now. We'll go ahead to the next. Okay, number one thing, we must attend to fears and feelings. Before we're able to even think about values and what's important, we have to acknowledge all the fears and feelings that we are sitting in right now. So this is a quote from Brene, and she says, leaders must either invest a reasonable amount of time attending to fears and feelings or squander an unreasonable amount of time managing ineffective and unproductive behavior. So this is really important. We can pretend like the fears and feelings aren't there. They are going to show up. They're going to show up in meetings. They're going to show up in work avoidance, which is a big one. They're going to show up with disengagement. They're going to show up as fight, flight, or flee. So we really need to what we call meet people where they're at. And where they are right now is stuck in fears and feelings. One of the simple ways to do this is to start your meetings, start your Zoom calls, once a week. Do just a check-in. How are you today? What was a fun thing that happened to you this weekend? What are two words that are you're holding right now? What two adjectives kind of show where you are kind of in this moment? There's a lot of creative small ways to kind of attend to people. And what you're doing is helping people feel and be seen, right? I can work for you. I will be willing to show up and work for you, even when I'm uncertain, if I know that you can see me and recognize, like, all right, Lori's a little stressed. I get it. She's got 4 kids. They're all going back to school, but ooh, that must be hard. Okay, what do you need from me? Oh, nothing really. There's nothing that you can do. We're just going to go through it. Okay, let's get to work, right? So part of it is just acknowledge where your people are at, acknowledge where your clients are at, acknowledge the people that you try to serve. Where are they? Meet them, see them, right? That's going to be a first step, and then kind of getting them to find their own grounded confidence. We're not taking fear away, we're not taking uncertainty away, but we're saying, I get it. I'm there too, and I see you, and together we're going to move through this, right? What do you need from me as the leader to help you through this? We'll go to the next slide. So a couple ways, right, is that thinking about, again, some questions, some actual questions you can ask. What's been the biggest shift you've had to make, as the summer ends? What are you missing the most? How are you taking care of yourself right now? What lessons do you see from this work? What are the possibilities that have come up for you, over the last month, if there's any, right? We've had huge shifts at home. We have a desire for connection that we are trying so desperately to find on Zoom and doing it pretty well, but it's just not the same, right? So there's these kind of restrictions on our life, right? Like you can't go outside, you have to wear masks 6 feet apart, and yet we're restricted, but yet with so much to do, right? Especially many of our organizations, that if we're blessed enough that we haven't been shut down, then there's a lot to do to pivot and shift. So it's just a very, we're in that time, that adaptive space of that one drawing. And so acknowledging this, make space for feelings. I will promise you, if you make space for feelings, people are going to be more productive. Often leaders, more traditionally mindseted leaders, think, oh, what a waste of time. We don't have time for fears and feelings. I'm telling you, you don't have time to not, because you are wasting time, inefficient, unproductive, work avoiding if you don't, right? Really, really important. Okay, so we'll move on. Next slide. All right, so we're establishing what's important, right? And so this, again, this could be a gift, and we'll get to the values. So this is where we are. What's important now? Maybe what's important hasn't changed. Maybe when we go to the value sort in just a moment, you're going to say, yeah, you know what this helped me do is recognize, like, man, I was living in my values the whole time. Or maybe it helps you recognize, wow, there's really a lot of other things that are important for me now that I see kind of where the world is putting us. So this time could be a gift for you, for your organization, to reconnect to what's important. What are the elements of your life that are too critical to let go of? What are you saying, we're keeping this. We are keeping this part of our work. And what are the elements that you might want to let go of because, oh, look at this new opportunity here. Let's move into this space, right? Yes, agreed. Centering purpose, absolutely. Realizing the challenges that we face as individuals of address and support it can turn into group-wide improvement. Absolutely. So let's work with those challenges, right? Make space for them. That's really great. Thank you, Amelia. Okay, next slide. Okay, next slide again. So we're going to do a little values work here. So I hope everybody has a piece of paper. So if you don't, I'm going to give you a moment. I'm going to talk through this slide. And before we go into the activity, hopefully you have a piece of paper or a journal and then something to write with, okay? So here's the thing. Values are what's important. And, I have to say, I've done a lot of work with organizations, and they've got, that eagle on the wall with integrity, or that little cat, perseverance, hanging on the branch, right? What does that even mean? What do those things mean? You can walk into almost any organization and they're probably going to have values written on the wall, pictures with words all over, words on their website. Very, very few have taken the time to operationalize their values. We need to get behavioral. What do the actions look like that reflect your values when they are lived out? And we'll get there once we think about our values, right? Because once we have operationalized definitions, we can then create a consistent culture that allows us to live these values out. And then when we're off our values, we can have the hard conversations and say, hey, you know what? Our values is communication, and you're not really communicating clearly. So what's going on, right? It allows us to take ownership and responsibility as we hold ourselves accountable. But first, we have to figure the values out and make them behavioral. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So some of you might have done this. Actually, we'll go to the next slide too, please. We're going to go into our values right now. Okay. So what I want you to do, and to try not to totally work ahead, but I want you to start by just writing down your top 10 values. And if they're in the on the conference website, there's the handouts for this, which does have a values list. So if you want to see when we do this in the big way, right, kind of we have a values list of 100 and some words, and you mark every one that resonates a little bit, and then we slowly start to narrow. But right now, think about your top 10 values, right? Is it family, wellness, achievement, trust, honesty, humor, adventure? Just think about what are the things that are important to you. Love, connection, wellness, fitness, health, fun, travel, diversity, justice, right? Kind of there's so many. So if you're able to kind of get onto that page and see the value list, you can look at all of those there. But I want to give you just a few minutes right now. I want you to write them down. Just kind of think to yourself, what are my top 10 values? And we're going to do this for ourselves. But this is a great exercise to do with your team, right? With your organization, with your team as a collective. What are our collective top 10 values? What do we say is the most important, right? So just kind of write a list and think of the things that are important to you. Sleep, right? Whatever, maybe friendship, whatever. There's so many that it could be: achievement, power, religion, a lot of different ones. Okay, so write those down. Now, if you've looked at the slide, you'll see I want you to narrow down to your top 3. So I would love everybody to think your top 3 values. So ideally, you know these, right? You know them kind of right away. You know questions. What are your top 3 values? Like, oh, mine are connection, wisdom, and spirituality. Connection, wisdom, wellness. I go back and forth between spirituality and wellness with mine, but connection's always there, and so is wisdom. So what are your values, right? What are they? You should know your top 3. Does everybody have their top 3? I just want to see if people are able to kind of get their top 3, and just write 3 down that you think are important. This is sort of more just the example of sort of what this would look like if you were to sit down and kind of do this more extensively, okay? Then I want you to write down, rank your values, right, from 1 to 5 based on how well they're being lived out in your life. For example, right, if I put a value of family, and it just so happens, this is a true story, that my family all lives here in San Diego. And so say I put a value of family as one of my top 3, but I recognize that, gosh, I've been so busy recently with work that I haven't returned my, dad's phone calls, and my sisters have been asking me to go out to lunch. I just haven't been able to because I don't really want to go out to lunch in a restaurant. And again, I'm sort of busy with my kids in the day. So, gosh, and then I realized with my kids, it's either we're doing homework or I'm working. So there isn't really much good family connection. Maybe I would rank it as a 2, right? It'd be get a 2 out of 5. And so I would be able to look at that and say, oh, look at this, right? One of the things that I say is most important to me right now is a 2. So try to do that with each one of your values. Can you rank them from 1 to 5? With 1 being not lived out at all and 5 being completely lived out. Now, one of the important aspects of this is that we have specific ways to define our values. Now, as you were thinking about how you ranked your values, what measure did you use to rank your values? That's going to help you find a definition. So in my example, right, I could say, gosh, family to me looks like meeting my family members in person a few times a week. Family to me looks like phone calls to check in with my core family. That's what the actions are. So you can work backwards to get a good definition by thinking about how you measured that 1 to 5, right? Again, family can be kind of an easy one. Where it gets tricky are with values like trust, courage, honesty, integrity, connection, right? These more abstract terms, how do we live them out? And I'd be curious if anybody has a value and a really kind of explicit definition, even if you feel like it's not wonderfully defined, it'd be great to put it up as an example. Another example is something like respect. Because we value respect, right? What does that look like? We all respect, great. What does it look like? Okay, respect means in meetings, we don't roll our eyes and we don't push back from the table and cross our arms when we're upset. We're going to respect each other enough to stay in the conversation. Another way to define respect in an operationalized way is saying because we respect each other, we respect each other's time. So we start on time and we end on time because we know everybody has things to do right now. So we respect each other, we honor time boundaries. Those are really great. They're operationalized, it's clear, you can hold each other accountable for that. If all of a sudden your meetings start late and go twice the time they're supposed to, you can say, "Hey, everybody, let's talk about this. We said that we value respect. One of the ways that we live out respect is in starting and ending on time. Our last 2 weeks of meetings have gone way beyond the time boundary. What's going on? Do we need to adjust the meeting and kind of prep everybody that we're going to go 2 hours instead of 1 hour? Or do we need to get tighter and kind of hold ourselves to a little bit more of a brief meeting? What is it? Accountability, right? It paves the way for accountability. So really, really important that you are behavioral. I can't stress this enough. And what happens often is that people write a value and then they again have an abstract way of defining it. Trust. I can believe in the people who are close to me. What does that look like? How do you live that out? Belief, right? What does belief look like? Faith. How does faith show up in action? We really, really need to get behavioral in order to hold ourselves accountable. I imagine if we were in a room together and I asked you, how many of you have been in an organization where you have the same meeting and the same issues year after year, right? Most people, especially if we're in higher ed, are going to raise their hand. It is even the corporate world. We talk about the same things. We talk about the same issues. We seem to never solve our problems, right? I used to be a college basketball coach. And one of the things that I would tell my team at the beginning of the season is, we're going to make mistakes. I want us to make mistakes because I know that when we take risks and we try to push our level, we're going to fail. We're going to make mistakes. I want us to make new mistakes. When we start the season, basketball season typically kind of starts competing in November, like sort of October. And in October, we're going to be making some mistakes. I don't want to be making the same mistakes in December. I want to make new mistakes. And we can't make new mistakes if we don't get actions tied to what's important, if we don't really get clear about the behaviors and the actions that we want to hold ourselves accountable for. So again, if you want to have an organization that is growing and making new mistakes, you need to get clear around your behaviors. So look at your list again and think about that gap, right? Do you have any that are ranked 2 or 3? What's in the gap, right? Where's the gap between the value that you say is in your top 3 and the way that you're living your life? And what actions might you take to close that gap? I can invite my sisters over to my house, right? And say, hey, coming over, I don't want to go to, let's do takeout, right? I'm really busy, but I'd love to see you. We can do a Zoom call, right? I can think about how I'm going to narrow that gap so I can live out that value and feel like my life is one of integrity. It's really important to get honest with ourselves here because this is what we're faced with, right? And for companies too, it's important to say, do we value innovation? This is a big one, right? A lot of companies and organizations, we value innovation. We value the client. We value with nonprofits, the people we serve. What does that look like, right? What does it look like and how accountable are you to actually serving the people you serve the way you want to serve them, right? Here's the opportunity. We either then can change our behaviors to get more consistent and reflect our values, or we can admit that that value is no longer in our top 3. And this is really important. And this is why I don't have family in my top 3. And it's a big thing. And I always kind of do this joke, and I ask kind of how many mothers are in the room and how many of those women put family in their top five. Almost everybody, because we're conditioned to be like, oh my gosh, I'm a mother, I better value my kids, right? I'd be a bad mother if I didn't. So we put family there. But then the problem is that maybe we start to look at our life and we say, gosh, yes, I do value it, but there's other things that I value more. So how do I get around that? Is I value connection. I really, really value connection. It's probably maybe my top one. And so of course, I want to connect with my kids and my family, right? So it's the connection that I value, not sort of the concept of the family itself. So it took a while to get clear about that, though. And it took a while to kind of really think about what behaviors in my life are really kind of making me feel like I'm living in alignment. Same thing, I'm giving personal examples, you can do with your team. You can do with your organization, right? Get honest with yourself about what's really important for you and for your work and the way you want to engage. Define the actions that are going to drive that, and then hold yourself accountable. Okay, let's keep moving. I want to spend a little bit of time on that because I wanted you to get a chance to actually do that exercise, right? But here's the other parts of this as we move through this, right? When you are leading in uncertainty, even when you're anchored to your values, if you don't know, admit it, right? How are we going to still serve the client when we are, how are we going to keep this program when we're losing so much money? I don't know the answer, but I do know that this is really important, and we're going to spend a lot of time finding a way. We're going to exhaust every possibility before we give this up. That I do know, right? In this yearning for answers and clarity, we are looking for the authority that we can trust. And false certainty, it does make us feel secure, but then when the reality hits, then it's like a brick, right? It's like a brick was dropped on us. That's not good leadership. So admit you don't know. Let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. And we can do that, right, with these kind of one-liners. Here's some examples. I'm doing everything I can to understand the impact of this. I don't have many answers, but I promise you, the leadership team is talking about this. We hear your concerns. I promise you we're talking about this. Hopefully you already have the trust built up to where it's like, okay, I believe you, right? I believe you as the leader. So the trust is where this is going to come in. Trust is going to serve you right now, right? We don't really know how this is all going to affect our long-term budget, but our priority is to keep this team intact, right? So we're going to go from that lens. We value each other. If we have to cut programs, we will. We're going to keep this team, right? Whatever it might be. So you've got to sort of be honest, right? And the third example is, again, one with my sophomore who's a big athlete and has been crushed with the kind of shift in the loss of sports has been the hardest thing. And I've had to tell him, I don't know if there's going to be a football season. I'm not going to tell you there's going to be one because I don't know, but everyone's trying to find a way to do it and do it safely, So we've got to be honest with people, because if we don't, we set them up for a lot of disappointment, and that's poor leadership and that's not fair, right? Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So as we move this, right, we're admitting we don't know. We'll go ahead and go again, right? We can acknowledge the uncertainty with someone that we can trust. Next slide. And I'm going to advance it. The next one, there we go. Honest when you do know. So here's the other part of this coin, right? Sometimes we know things and they're hard truths, right? But delaying it, denying it, hiding it doesn't make it go away, right? It's the same thing with the kind of pretending that you don't know, right? If you do know and you pretend, like, it's only going to delay the hurt. So this is an integrity piece, right? This is being willing to have these hard conversations with people. And hopefully there's enough trust that they know you have done everything sort of in your leadership power to kind of make the best decisions on behalf of the people that are part of your organization and the people that you serve, right? We don't want unmet expectations that just faces us with disappointment. And that's what's challenging. We can get through hard disappointment, right? When we think one thing and then get told the other, that's almost harder than just dealing with the hard in the first place if people are upfront with us. Okay, let's continue on. So we are thinking about still being honest when we do know, and then we can have some ways to say this. If we go to the next slide, you can see that there are, again, some one-liners that we can say when we do know something, right? So it's this idea of people respect leaders who are upfront with them, right? So if you do want respect, one of the ways to live out the value of respect is we're honest with each other, even when it's hard. We ask hard questions of each other. That's sort of a really important piece. So here's the 4 ones. And I want to get to accountability right now. So let's go to the next slide. We're going to go 2 slides ahead. We'll go ahead to 1 more. Accountability. Okay. So here's the piece where values come in, right? We can own the responsibility for the work because we've created behaviors. So kind of here's the story, right? You're in a meeting, right? And you're kind of sitting around a table and someone, the meeting ends and someone like throws up their hands. It's like, and storms away. And you immediately think, oh my gosh, right? They're mad at me. They're mad at me. And one of your values is defined as communication. So that, both you not communicating and that person just throwing up their hands, that's not very effective communication. So because you have communication as a value and you've said we talk to each other, that's how we live it out, you could then say, hey, I want to come to you because you threw up your hands and you kind of did a sigh, and I'm not sure if you're mad at me or not, but I know you're trying to communicate something, but I didn't understand you. You want to tell me what's going on? And then they can say, yes, you made me so mad. You weren't supposed to, say that in the meeting. We said we were going to wait till we had more data. Or the person could say, oh my gosh, that meeting went so long. Why? It wasn't even about you, but why did they go so long? It allows accountability, right? If we anchor to the values. Same thing, with if you value wellness, right? So here's an example, a simple example, again, back with my family and my kids. We value wellness. One of the things that we say is for wellness is we try to break a sweat every day, right? So at the end of the day, if I've had a long work day and my kids have escaped me and they haven't gone outside to play and it's nighttime, I might say, okay, everybody, let's go. We're going to go, we need a fast walk or jog the block. It's why, what? No. Because we say we want to break a sweat every day. That's important to us. So let's do it, right? We didn't do it today. So it holds us accountable. We could say, you know what? It's been a long day. We're consciously going to say, we know we like to try to break a sweat every day, but we're not going to do it today. At least we're accountable for it, right? And absolutely. So Megan, is it common to feel like you're not leading well in times of uncertainty? Of course it is. And I would say one of the important points to that is define for yourself what is good leadership. And I'm going to tell you that good leadership is addressing the problems that you and your organization are facing that don't have an answer, sort of with sort of integrity and transparency, doing everything that you can as a leader to bring the people to the table who need to have conversations about what's going on, be open and honest. That's good leadership, right? Holding steady. That we use that phrase to mean really staying anchored, not losing your head. That's good leadership, right? I'd be curious, Megan, if you have kind of a specific example of something where you feel like you're not doing it well, because chances are it's a story that we're telling ourselves like, oh, I'm not doing it well. Check in with your people. Hey, everybody, this is a really hard time. What can I do as a leader to help smooth this kind of, phase, to help guide you in what we need to get done? One of the main tenets of Dare to Lead is clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So part of it is, have you been clear with your team? Are your values outlined? Do you have behaviors? Are they operationalized, right? Is it clear about what actions lead out your values? And then do you hold each other accountable? That's leadership right there, right? It's not about having all the answers. It's not about making $1 million, although that would be great. But sometimes leadership is just moving through feeling complete, right? And productive and sane and well, right? I mean, right now it's a really tough time for a lot of people. So maybe this is an opportunity to define what does good leadership look like right now? And then let me put sort of those values and the behaviors so that I can do it, right? Let's go to the next slide. We're getting through this here. This is a really important one. Value yourself, right? As a leader, there's this metaphor on the airplane, right? Put your oxygen mask on first. You are no good to your team, to the people you're trying to serve, to your family, if you yourself are not taken care of, right? You cannot be responsible for others if you are not responsible for yourself. There's this myth of sort of like the heroic martyred leader who never sleeps and just puts everybody first. Not leadership, right? They're not probably being as effective as they could be if they really take care of themselves. Because the other thing you're doing is you're modeling that. You're modeling that self-care for your team so they can also take care of themselves. And in this time right now, we need that. Maybe what we need more than anything is that self-care and care of others, right? Who you are is how you lead. Full stop. Really, really important. We'll go to the next slide. So you want to choose self-care, right? And I want to just go on one more slide to this idea of a posture of possibility. So we're going 2 slides forward right now. And self-care, I think you can think about get good sleep, connect with people that give you the support. But right now, one of the things we can do is we can kind of establish this posture of possibility, meaning, yes, we're in a really tough time. Yes, things are uncertain, but there's a way through it. There's possibilities in this time right now. Let's figure out together what they might be, right? This is a really great way to, again, instill some hope without doing a false sense of security or false sense of, productivity. But your actions and energy are going to impact the people that you lead. So be open and honest about what you know, right? And be inviting. Invite them to join you. Meet them where they're at. And that them are the people that you are working with, who are working for you, who you are working for. Invite that connection so that everybody can sort of jump in that boat, have buy-in around this is what's most important and this is what's possible based on our values, right? Let's go to the next slide. And this one's another important one. And I just wanted to kind of share it where in the absence of data, we fill in the blanks. We are hardwired to create a story to make sense and make meaning of our world. We do it, right? Here's the funny example is that how many times have you been in a text conversation with somebody and then you see kind of the 3 little dots, to show that they're writing, and then it goes away and they didn't send a text and you're like, wait a minute. Are they not saying anything anymore? Wait, what did I say? Is this conversation over? They were just there. Why'd they change your mind, right? We fill in the blanks because we want to make sense of our world. So know that people will do that, right? Give them values, give them actions to guide you and your team to be accountable. We'll go to the next slide. So this is my info. Would love to stay in touch with you. Feel free to follow us, the Conscious Leadership Academy at USD. We put out kind of articles and we're kind of launching a lot of new content right now because that's one of our opportunities, right? If we can't hold our events in the same way, we're putting out book reviews. We're going to have a book club if you're local San Diego. And then my Instagram as well, Lorri Sulpizio. Would love to connect and stay in touch. And if anybody has any questions, we have about a minute or so. And I think we could I don't know if we get to stay later if it closes down. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, everybody, can anchor to your values, live out what's important. And that's the best kind of leadership that we can do. All right, I think we're at like 30 seconds left. So thank you so much for joining. Have a great rest of the day. And if you attended sessions all day, they were really great. So I'm assuming and hoping that you got a lot out of the day. There's some great sessions and some great people to learn from. So thanks for joining us here and have a wonderful afternoon. I'm glad. Thank you.